Good evening. Let me just begin by saying I'm thankful to have the opportunity to speak to you on a very difficult subject, but a needed subject today, and that is on the blended family. When we think about our society today, we know that that's a common thing. Probably 20 or 30 years ago, it wasn't as common as it is today. And so with it being more present in our world today, we need to know how to handle that better in the church, as well as how to do better in our homes when we blend families together. I guess the reason I was asked to speak about this is because we have a blended family in our household. And I just want to tell you very quickly how that came to be. Back when I was preaching at Northport in 2005, my wife was diagnosed with her third brain tumor. We had been through 2.5 years of her dealing with others, and now after 3.5 years, we finally had gotten to the point where we could not overcome this disease. And so my first wife passed away November of 2005. I had two small children at that point. Courtney was in third grade and Braxton was in kindergarten. They were 8 and 6. And so it was a very difficult time for us as a family. And we did the best that we could, just like anybody else. And I was a single dad at 37. Never thought I would be at that spot in my life. And yet here I was, a preacher, a father, and now not knowing much of what to do other than really leaning on the church family during that difficult time. So during that same time, my wife now was going through a very difficult divorce. She found out her husband was seeing someone else. She tried her best to try to get him to go to counseling, to try to work things out, and yet he would not do that. And so eventually he just packed his bags and he moved out with his kids begging him not to go. And so she went through a difficult time right about the same time I was going through my difficulties, and we didn't even know each other at that point. Now, we had some similar friends, mutual friends, that ended up playing matchmaker many months later. And we ended up meeting about 7 months after my wife died, and we went out on our first date. Talking about awkward. If you've ever been there, and I know maybe some of you have, but many of you haven't, it's very different, especially dating. When I remember when I was a teenager, to call somebody at their house was a little nerve-wracking because I was afraid that one of their parents was going to answer, and I would have to talk to them. This time it was the other way around. I was calling Christy, and I was hoping one of her kids wouldn't answer, because it's really awkward to say, "Hey, can I talk to your mom?" Just a little different there. And so, anyway, we ended up going out on our first date in June, late June of 2006, and it wasn't very long before we realized that we were supposed to be together. And so we were married December the 29th of 2006, and I moved back up here to Florence, where she lived, left Northport, and started preaching here at Stony Point in January of 2007. And that began the process of blending two families. She had two children who were a little bit older, and I had two, and so here comes the Brady Bunch without the other two kids, and as my wife says, without an Alice that she really needed. And so here we are trying to fit these children together, and they were a few years apart, but my oldest and her youngest were only a couple of years apart, and so it ended up making a little stair-step type of situation. And so we ended up blending families. She had been married 18 years the first time. I had been married 10 years my first time. And so we had some things that we were used to, things that were part of who we were as family, and now all that's colliding and merging. And as you know, a blended family can be difficult. And there are a lot of potential problems when you blend two homes together, especially with children. And so very briefly, as much as I can fit all this in a brief time, I want to talk to you about how to do that. And I'm not an expert on it, but I'm just going to offer to you some principles that I've learned along the way. We've been married almost 14 years now, and I think things have gone very well. And so I want to share some of those, what we learned, how to do things good, and what not to do by learning the hard way, some of the things that we need to look at together. First of all, let me mention the fact that when it comes to success in any marriage and any family, the basics are still the same, whether it's the first time around or the second time around. Genesis 2, we follow God's plan for husband and wife to become one, that we understand the fact that husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church, and that wives are to respect their husbands and submit to their authority that Christ has given them. So putting priority on relationship with God first and then with each other is very important. Some of the basics are still the same. However, there are some challenges that do come with a second marriage and a blending of the home. Matter of fact, statistics show that 67% of second marriages fail. And I know that's a high percentage. And no doubt it's because of some of the things that they've been through before, but also the challenges of trying to blend. And so let's talk about those challenges. First of all, we need to deal with the past. I think that's one of the main things that helps us in blending the family. You know, both the man and the woman have some baggage, as we call it, that they bring into this new relationship. And most of it was how they were treated and how they treated their spouse during that time period when they were married the first time. Now, most of us are understanding the fact that, hey, we all have our mistakes in our past. We have some things we wish we would have done different. And this is really an opportunity to learn from the past. You know, we always say history can repeat itself, and we've seen that in the lives of so many others. But this is an opportunity to learn, again, what to do and what not to do. And so we need to understand that when we come into a relationship like this, that maybe both of us were in preservation mode. And when I call it that because I'm surviving as a single dad with two small kids. And I'm trying to work and provide for them and take care of them the best way I can, and wash clothes, cook meals, doing everything myself that is all upon me now as a single parent. While she's doing the same thing. She's working, trying to take care of her kids. And so we're in survival mode, preservation mode. And so we are so used to that, when we come together, we're a little bit on edge, you might say, or a little overloaded in a lot of ways. And so that tends to make things a little bit more challenging. So patience is required. You know, any of the struggles that we go through and any of the getting used to one another, even in a first marriage, it takes patience with getting to know one another, getting into a routine. The same is true with a second marriage, but it is a little bit more of a challenge because of the circumstances in the past that you're dealing with. So dealing with the past issues can be different, but you can work through it. And it helps us to know what to expect. And communication, folks, is the key to that. Talk to your spouse and say, you know, or if you're dating somebody and considering getting married the second time, you know, talk about those hurts. Talk about those feelings that you had the first time around. And you can learn about that person and what they've been through, and you can appreciate that and try to nurture them back to good health again in this new relationship. And so first of all, we need to deal with the past. Anything that is unresolved, that needs to be resolved, or anything that has been a wound, sometimes takes months, if not years, to heal. And so you have to be sensitive to that for maybe a number of months or years as you start this new relationship. But secondly, we have to also deal with children. Now, in most second marriages, children are involved, and that's really part of the blending process. And usually children are a great blessing from God, aren't they? But at the same time, they can also be a source of conflict, not only in second marriages, but also in first marriages. So you understand the fact that children play a very maybe challenging role at times in the blending of a family. In some cases, children are not going to understand why that they're not part of the original family that they were a part of. They'll ask questions. Why can't you and mommy or you or daddy get back together? And they tend to be kind of rejecting of the new person coming in. In a sense, they're saying, you're not my mom or you're not my dad. And so dealing with the children in the blending process can be a challenge. When you think about what to do, you think about the fact that in other cases, children will work against each other, like they do in first marriages. Sometimes, brother will fight with sister to try to get their way and manipulate parents. Well, that's kind of added to when it comes to two sets of children coming in. If you ever saw the movie Yours, Mine, and Ours, that's exactly what the whole movie is about. I hope I hadn't ruined it for you if you haven't seen it. But the children on one side work against the children on the other side, and at one point they get together and decide, hey, we're going to work together in order to break this marriage up because none of us want it. And so that's what they did, and in the process they found out that they really liked each other. And really that's what you're going to find is that children are very resilient, that they tend to blend better sometimes than we adults do. But these children also can try to act out. They can be kind of opposed to this new relationship and new setting of having other siblings now, in a sense, to compete for mom and dad's attention. And so that presents the problem. So you and your new spouse need to develop a plan. And that's the thing that kind of resolves this issue. We've already talked about the fact that you already have to deal with the past, and now you have to deal with children. But there has to be a plan going in to say, okay, these are the rules. This is how we're going to live life in our new blended family. You may have done things this way before or that way before, but now we have to come up to a consolidation of this family to the point where we make our own rules, and these are our guidelines. And so you come up with a plan. And then you talk with the children and be open and honest with them about it. Make sure that you communicate with them to say, this is a situation that I know is difficult for you, but at the same time, we love you and we're going to try to help you get used to this. And most of the time it works better than what we think it's going to. In my case, I was blessed in the sense that all four kids got along from day one. That doesn't mean they didn't fight, or doesn't mean that they didn't have their moments, because that's normal in any family. But there was never a big conflict between my kids and her kids, or any kind of conflict necessarily between me and her kids, or Christy and my kids. And really what we've decided, and this is one of the best things you could ever do, is to say, these are all our kids. They may not be blood related, but in a sense, you're adopting them into your home. And they become your children, and you need to treat them that way. The worst thing, folks, that you can do is to treat your biological children differently than you do the children who are not biologically connected to you. That will show favoritism, and that's hard to overcome sometimes because, as they say, blood is thicker than water, and sometimes it shows itself in certain situations. But the best thing to do is develop a love for those children quickly that are not blood related to you, and treat them equally and the same as you do all the way across the board with the others. And communicate to them how this new home is going to work. Communicate your love for all of them and your support for all of them. And then love them. Learn to love them very deeply. And I found that it didn't take very long at all for me to develop that love for them and them for me. And same when it came to Christy and our two younger kids, it ended up developing very quickly. So you have to give them time, though. You can't put unreal expectations on them. You just love them, continue to treat them right, and things usually happen quicker than not. And so be patient during this process. Understand their pain also. They've been through a difficult time. Whether it's the death of their parent or the divorce of a parent, those are always difficult things for children to deal with. Again, they're resilient. They come back from that maybe better than we do, but they're still in pain. So we have to remember that. And, in my case, let me just say that what I did once Christy and I started dating, it was maybe a little bit bothersome to still have pictures of Julie, my first wife, all around my house. And so what I did with that process was I would just every month or so take one of those down. And I might even put one of them in the kids' room or something like that. You want to make sure, especially if your spouse has passed away, that new relationship doesn't appear to just completely replace the one who has passed on. That you keep their memory alive, that you talk about them, you share stories about them, and hopefully your spouse that you married the second time is going to be supportive of that as well. That they want them to remember their mother or their father. And so you continue to let those pictures be. But again, there had to be a transition to where pictures didn't just fill the house of us. And so I slowly took those and put them in different places and didn't take them all down at one time or make a huge transition. A lot of times it just takes a little time and forethought to see how you're going to do it. Again, you have to come up with a plan, and the plan has to encompass how things are going to be in the new family, and how you're going to go about things, and maybe even how much and how often you talk about the other parent in that process. And when we think about that, it does, again, present probably the hardest challenge dealing with parents, but at the same time, it works out in a lot better way if we're just patient and we love them and we're understanding of them and help them along, and all of us will work through that together. Now, thirdly, we also have to deal with what I call exes. There might be an ex-husband or an ex-wife involved, maybe on both sides, when it comes to blending this family. And so in most second marriages, there's at least one ex that you're going to have to deal with. And understand that they will continually be a factor in your life and in the kids' lives. They'll be a presence. They'll be tied to you in that sense to deal with at birthdays and ball games and holidays. And so there's really no ignoring it or escaping it. So the best thing to do is to deal with these exes in the best way. And I even hate to call them the exes because it sounds like they're the bad people. And that's the first thing that I want to tell you today, is you need to make sure that you don't treat them like the enemy, the bad guy. Even if they hurt you, even if they were to blame for the breakup of your first marriage, you still need to be Jesus to them. Need to treat them with love and respect, just like you would anybody else in the world that has wronged you. To love your neighbor as yourself, to love your enemy, if you want to say that, even though we're saying they're not the enemy, you need to treat them with great respect. But keep in mind, if the conflict was involved in that first marriage ending, it will only be worse for a little while once you remarry, because sometimes the ex is not happy for you that you have found someone else. And so they will try to make your life miserable. They will try to make things hard on you as far as when you start to blend this family and you start to try to develop this closer relationship with one another. And so it may be difficult near the front end of this. And it was for us. My wife had passed away, but her husband, her first husband, was still around town and in our community. And so we would see him periodically, again, at those events, ball games and birthdays and such, school events. And at first, he was trying to be very difficult. He tried to cut the money off, and for the kids, for the child support. He tried to be difficult when it came to dealing with us. He was rude to my wife, and it made me want to defend her. And so there were a lot of those, early conflicts that maybe if I look back, I should have handled better than I did. But, I was going to be the provider and the protector, and I was going to make sure that he didn't hurt them anymore. And so there were times where I probably was way too harsh in dealing with him. But I learned better, and things did get better. And I'm happy to say that we have learned to work together, and that's the challenge that you have as well, because that is the absolute best thing for those children involved. For their biological father and their biological mother to be able to be civil, to be kind to one another, to deal with one another in good, peaceful ways without a whole lot of conflict, if at all possible. Again, I know that as much as depends on you, as Romans 12 says, live peaceably with all men. And I know you can't control the other person, but you can control you. And so make sure that you are a peacemaker, even when it's hard, because, folks, I know there are times where the hair's standing up on the back of your neck and your blood pressure's up, but you still have to remember to stay calm and try to create peace in a difficult time. And in time, if you treat them nice, more than likely they're going to come around and start treating you better as well. It's kind of the principle in Romans chapter 12, the last part especially, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And I say that to say it's not that they're evil and you're good, it's just that the situation demands being good instead of the evil, choosing the good over the evil response that you could have there. And again, you don't have to be best friends with that person, but you do need to be able to work with them. You know, over almost 14 years now, I'm happy to say, and the reason I tell you this is not to say, oh, you know, it worked out great for me, but we have become, almost friends through this whole process. And again, we had a lot of conflict the first 3 or 4 years, but over the other years that have developed of us trying harder and being kinder to one another, now we can go out to eat together and not have any ill feelings whatsoever. We can call one another up on the phone. Matter of fact, he works at a local dealership here, and when I go get my oil changed there, I'll get out of my car and I'll go sit at his desk and talk to him while the oil change is being done. And he's been over to the house to eat. And so there are times where people look at us and think, really? Y'all are doing that? How is it that y'all are able to go out to eat and do those things together? But I can tell you this, that is the absolute best thing for you, for them, and for the kids, because it gives you peace. And it's really good not having to carry that grudge around with you anymore. You know, I've been set free from that. I don't have any ill feelings. I don't have any jealousy or anger or terrible thoughts like I used to have. And it's very freeing for me. And I tell you, I just love being at peace in that relationship. And so if you are there in conflict right now, work toward having that peace, because it's so much better of a life when you can let that go and when you can get past that. And so dealing with exes is a big part of blending the family, and you need to try to make peace and work together as much as possible. And then in the next place is dealing with comparisons. You know, the tendency we have a lot of times, if we have one experience, is to compare it to the new experience. And marriage and family are no different. You know, one big challenge is not to play the comparison game when it comes to certain aspects of the family. You know, again, we're creatures of habit. We're set in our ways. It's real easy to say, well, we used to do it this way. Or she or he did this way. Now, that's something you have to be very careful about, referring back to your first spouse when it comes to how you're going to operate in this new family. And so we need to avoid comparisons in all areas of the family, about parenting, about being a good husband or wife. We need to look at this as a brand new relationship and never bring those past things up if at all possible. And when I think about different areas of which comparison will creep in, sometimes it creeps in about how discipline was handled. Sometimes it creeps in when we talk about maybe how things were done at the holidays. There's so many different areas to where we can kind of compare how it used to be to how it is now. But again, make this a brand new family as if you never were married before. It's not that you're trying to erase the past and ignore it and act like it never happened. You're just simply trying to give this new family the best possible chance it can have. And by not comparing each other to the past, that's going to help you in a lot of ways. And communicate only about your present relationship and moving forward. And that's the last thing I want to share with you tonight, is the fact that dealing with moving forward is one of the best things you can do once you deal with all the past things and all the people involved. You deal with moving forward. You establish this new home and you be proactive in doing that. Factors involved are this. Where are we going to live? That was a challenge for us. I lived in Northport. She lived here in Florence. And we were asking who's going to move. It's a pretty big move over, a 2.5-hour move. You got to sell a house. You got to uproot kids from their schools and their friends, one way or the other. Maybe you're local and you don't have to deal with that so much, but we had to deal with distance as well. And so we determined that it was best for me to find a job back in Florence because I had lived here 7 years before I moved to Northport. So I already had a history here. And she had all her family here and still does. And so it was not going to be easy for her to uproot and leave all of her family, her parents, her sisters, and all those folks that she was so close to here. So I made the sacrifice, and I remind her every now and then that I'm the one that moved. And so we had only been there 3 years. A little easier because our roots were not quite as deep there, even though the Northport church was so good to us through the death of my wife. That made it very hard. And so we decided where to live, and it was going to be in her house because she built on family land. Now, let me just say this right now, and this is not a knock against where I live, but if at all possible, when you start your new family, start over in a different house. Because that house is now going to be your house. And you can start to build the memories and the traditions and all that in that house. And you don't have to deal with the past of that house, whether it's good or bad, because sometimes where you live does tend to drag you back in the past sometimes or hold you back or maybe even create conflict for the new person. Here I am moving into a house where her and her first husband lived. And that was a little challenging for me to get used to, as you can imagine. But because she was on family land, we really didn't want to have to sell that house. And so what we did was we made it our own. We repainted, did new furniture, made a few changes here or there. And we just made a really concentrated effort to make that our house. And so we did that. And so I moved in, and now I've been there, like I said, almost 14 years. Her and her first husband only lived there together about 4 or 5 years. So now it's my house as far as number of years, and it was from day one. So that's one thing, is where are we going to live? Who's going to move? How are we going to make this work together? Then once you do, you refer to things maybe in a certain way. Like in our case, she said, well, that's Brooke's bedroom and that's his bathroom, and that's Katie's room and that's her bathroom. And I said, well, that's great. I said, now that Braxton and Courtney also have their rooms up there, which we're separate, now it's got to be the boys' bathroom and the girls' bathroom. Changing terminology was a little bit of a challenge because they had established their little routine there in what they called things. And you might think that's no big deal. But, you again want to make things even and equal, and usually somebody's going to notice that. And so now it's the boys' bathroom and the girls' bathroom. And the boys' bathroom you don't want to go anywhere near, by the way, at my house. Similar to gas stations. Where are we going to worship? That's sometimes a challenge, because if you have worshiped at two different congregations, especially locally, do we go to this one or that one? Or do we find a new one to where we both feel like this is a fresh start? That's another thing that you need to consider. Getting names changed on all the mail and such. There for a long time, Christy's first last name kept appearing on a lot of her mail. And, it's understandable, but you don't want that to go on for very long, because you want the new family to be what you see in the mail even. And you might think, well, those are petty things. But let me tell you, it's those little things that will start to drive wedges in between you and cause problems. And so let's pay attention to detail in establishing this new home and new traditions and how we're going to go about things. So those are just some of the things that you have to deal with in establishing your new home and moving forward in the right way. Start new traditions. That's one of the best things that I think you could do, and we did that. It kind of pulls everybody together. Now that we're all together, we're going to do this every Christmas, or we're going to do this every year. Matter of fact, we've gotten to where we go to a certain restaurant in Huntsville before the kids go back to college every year. Now with the virus situation, we didn't get to do it this year, but we had done that for several years, and it was something they all looked forward to. And so start new traditions that helped bind those kids together and bind this family together. And another question comes up as you move forward. Do we have more children? I remember that at 38, here we are married, and that's getting a little bit older for having children. It's not impossible. But first, our oldest, Katie, said, "Oh, I think it'd be sweet for y'all to have a baby together." And so we really didn't think that we wanted any more than 4 kids. That was enough. And we contemplated it for just a little bit. And all of a sudden, she came rushing back in. And she goes, no, I don't want y'all to have a baby. And we said, "Why?" And she said, "Because I'm afraid you'll love that one more than you do the rest of us." Now, that doesn't keep you from having future children. Let me just say that. But again, that's kind of the idea sometimes that the present kids have about the future kids if you introduce them into the situation. But more than likely, they'll love them just like they have the other siblings and realize you don't love them any differently than you do the rest of them. And so how you react, again, has a lot to do with that. If you start treating that new baby better than everybody else, then you're going to send the wrong message. But don't let that discourage you from having children. If you want to have more after you blend that family, sometimes that ties you together even closer. We have families here at Stony Point that they have done just that. They're in their second marriages. They already had kids, and now they've had kids together. And it's really a beautiful thing with the families that I'm thinking about here. So that's another consideration. But I could go on, but I hope this has helped. More than anything, as long as you're living the Christian life and living like God wants you to, and you face every one of these conflicts and situations and challenges with the right attitude, the attitude of Jesus, then you're probably going to work through this in a very favorable way. But there's no certain manual, there's no certain book that's written on this subject. It's just unique and specific to each family. And so I hope some of these principles have helped you in the study if you're in that situation of blending a family. And just know that it takes a lot of prayer, it takes a lot of work, and it can be even better than any other family situation you've had if you work at it. I am a blessed man. I am happy as I can be in this family that I'm in now. And very, very thankful to God that He has blessed me in such wonderful ways. And I pray that He will bless you as well in your future family, whatever your situation is. But may God bless you, and thank you again for studying with us tonight. We hope to see you soon. Thank you.